Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and for your work on this committee. Today, I'm afraid that rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse has become divisive here in Washington, but it's exactly what the Americans want us to address. Before this year, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse was actually a bipartisan endeavor and talked about and had broad support. It appears that now there's a number of lawmakers, bureaucrats, and media that actively support the status quo, which in essence is on the side of allowing the waste and fraud to continue. We've had decades of Inspector General reports that have outlined the reckless misuse of government funds with little or no appetite to address that. And you mentioned that earlier in today in terms of that there was the status quo, or the push on the status quo was to resist the loss of recipients of the payments that were making through that. The new administration is shattering some of the status quo and tackling the problem with their directive that they got from the American people last November. As the chair of the Social Security Subcommittee here in the House, I want to just highlight that for everybody in America, that every dollar that's saved by eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse is a dollar that can go towards benefits to seniors that have earned them, or for benefits in other programs as well. Typically, things have been slow here in Washington to change with just the bureaucracy and the size of the government. If you contrast that with the private sector, U.S. businesses, if they don't innovate and adapt, they die. In D.C., as Ronald Reagan once quote, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on Earth. Some of the advancements that we're seeing with artificial intelligence are already disrupting industries throughout the country, whether it's in medical field, manufacturing, or technology. The federal government needs to be looking at ways that we can actually be more responsible and use AI. Dr. Thomas, based on data from 2018 to 2022, GAO estimates that aggregate fraud was between $233 billion to $521 billion each year. On the low end, that means that the government's lost more than $1 trillion in a 5-year period, and maybe as much as $2.6 trillion. It's unfathomable that people be against finding and eliminating this blatant theft of taxpayer dollars. So what, from a GAO's perspective, are you doing to implement machine learning and data analytics to help reduce that fraud, and how other federal agencies can work to get that number closer to zero?
So within our data analytics programs, we are developing tools for our analysts to identify the flags that I mentioned earlier of what are potential indicators of fraudulent events, fraudulent programs, fraudulent payments. And making those tools potentially available to the rest of the agencies to use. And we continue to work with the agencies to help them adopt the recommendations that we put forth in each of our reports. When we talk about fraud across the government as an estimate, that comes from information that we receive from each of the agencies. And as we work with that, we develop a whole bunch of recommendations. And we follow up with them, and adopting those recommendations we believe will bring down the risk of fraud. Additionally, we want them to use our fraud risk framework that we have implemented and shared with them that allows them to look at programs and identify where potential fraud could exist if that program was implemented in that particular way, and make adjustments to try to, just as you talked about, stop fraud from happening before it happens.
Thank you. Mr. Chilson, I think when we talk about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, sometimes a false narrative gets promoted that the federal government is taking away benefits from Americans that have rightfully deserved those. Trying to alleviate some of this fear-mongering, can you help dispel some of those fears and explain how AI can more effectively target those bad actors, target the improper payments to ensure that our government programs provide the resources to the right beneficiaries?
Well, accuracy is really important, and what we've seen in the private sector is that these tools can help both eliminate fraud, but also serve the people who are rightfully getting benefits more quickly and accurately. And so I do think that we have opportunities in this space. The financial sector does this all the time. And what it's found is that, you may remember you got lots of calls, maybe 5 years ago, you got lots of calls anytime you went on a trip with your credit card. Well, now they can identify when there's fraud with a lot fewer of those false positives. And that's a convenience to the people who are getting benefits, as well as those who are, as well as addressing the people who are fraud.
Well, thank you. And I've run out of time like so many others. We have so many questions I could ask each of you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.